All right, so let's talk about the actual ritual itself. The debate stage, the format, the moderator, the four men pretending that they have any agency in a country that's run mostly by inertia and various lobbying groups, resource extraction, and obviously oil and gas. The setting was Maison Radio Canada in Montreal, a building that has the same kind of haunted aura as the shuttered Sears that neoliberalism has created. Steve Paikin on Thursday night, veteran bootlicker from TVO, professional Canadian neutral man. He was the guy that was tapped to moderate for the English language debate on Thursday night. Patrice Waugh was the debate moderator on Wednesday night. I would probably say that Patrice Waugh did a much better job, even though he was also just very slimy in the way he was doing it as well. Their job supposedly was to wrangle the four candidates and steer them through what was essentially 5 core themes: tariffs, trade, affordability, public safety, energy, and climate. And then also at the end, leadership in times of crisis. So like in practice, it was pretty much like watching someone try to host a roundtable while 4 separate guests tried to hijack the mic, because it wasn't really a roundtable. It was a federal election leader debate. I feel like on Wednesday night, the moderator had much more control over it, but Paikin was very much just running it like it was a 6 o'clock roundtable on TVO. And it really, because of that, it really gave a platform for Mark Carney, the technocrat messiah, that you could see that Paikin was just pretty much glazing. He was very much on board and wanted to hear everything that Carney was saying and gave him the floor as much as possible. He got the most time, and it obviously was not an accident, very much a pattern. The numbers, if you looked at the numbers, it looked like Jagmeet Singh had about 10 minutes less speaking time on Thursday night. I think it was about 4 minutes on Wednesday, but like egregious difference of time on Thursday night. And the way in which Paikin was just not giving the floor, not giving an equal chance for everyone to speak on these things. It was very telling as the debate continued. Obviously, social media caught it too. You saw there was a whole bunch of people on Twitter and X and Threads and whatever going ablaze with people talking about the interruption and the speaking times. Essentially, Carney got the director's cut, Singh got the TikTok version. So let's get down to the political talking points. I feel like Carney, he really approached this stage like a man who'd been prepped by both a PR team and like a crisis management team, and it really showed. He spoke in these smooth, rounded sentences like a man that was explaining mortgage rates and corporate taxes to a fucking golden retriever. And his core message was just like, trust me, it's very complicated. You might not get it. I get it. I'm a grown up here. We'll get there. And his vibe with, and U.S. tariffs, he very much had, I think one of his talking line was, quote, "We need to accept that our trading relationship with the United States has fundamentally changed under Donald Trump. We must diversify our partnerships." And that translation, something I've been talking about a lot, the American empire is crumbling, and I've got a spreadsheet for that. I've got a way to integrate us with a new multipolar world, and this is why I'm the guy to do it. Mark Carney very much also invoked the economic resilience idea like it was a religious chant. Singh pressed him on this in regards to his connection with Brookfield Asset Management and the cancellation of capital gains tax. Carney dodged it like someone who'd been told, don't touch the rich guy stuff. And it's clear, like his leadership style is pure technocratic sedation. It's like governance with the edges sanded off, smooth, calming, willing to take criticism if it's in good faith, and then try to build a common. It's very Obama. Like listening and then being very pompous and like talking down. It's the classic liberal way of approaching things. You co-opt the grievance to make it sound like, I hear you, I feel you, we are there, we're working on it, and just it's a way to uphold the status quo. As far as Jagmeet Singh, his overall performance, I'll get into it like in depth in a little bit, but he definitely came out swinging and kept swinging, sometimes effectively, sometimes like a guy wrestling with shadows. It was a calculated shift in tone. What I really got in this, in a combat sports idiom, it really felt like a guy in a fight that was down numerous rounds, going into the final round, that the only way for him to win was to get a stoppage. So he was just coming out, throwing bolos, looking to get the knockout. The puncher's chance type thing. And he even, he referenced it. He said, hey, I'm a scrappy guy. And obviously this stuff it's rehearsed. He knows he's trying to use that like fighter complex that works with certain political figures, and he's using it as like a populist thing. But it's one of those things where it's just like too little too late. Obviously, it doesn't mean that it's not true. Like, I feel like he does manage to like throw his weight around. But again, it's just like, it's too little too late. He did challenge Carney, and he had one line, and it was one of the few moments that really cut through that PMC managerial haze. He also went after Poilievre, particularly on climate and crime. And again, pretty good, but overall, because of like the way that he interjected, and it felt like, and I'm not saying that he shouldn't have, I'm just saying that like tactically, the way that he continuously interjected, it made it seem like Pakin was kind of like brushing it off, and that ended up compounding into him having 10 less minutes of speaking time than Carney, and he got buried in the crosstalk. And again, both moderators did really little to reel it in. And that's the thing, is like the NDP's problem here is structural. They're stuck being like the conscience of the debate. Well, the liberals and the conservatives get to play the tug of war of where the debate is going. Singh's tone was like more abrasive, more angrier, more urgent, more combative. But I feel like when you're being like ostracized on a national stage like that, it probably does more harm than good. But I'll talk about Singh a little bit more in another segment here. Poilievre, though, he really showed up wearing two costumes, that faux populist persona and then like the stoic crime dad. He really leaned into the anger bit, but not in a way that felt like authentic, I'll say. Like, it was seething resentment of someone who really knows that he doesn't need to win the argument. He just needs to like present this like a certain vibe. And that was really what he was doing, talking about foreign students protesting Israel and things like that. One of the funny things that he said here was, he said, and it was like a split screen. The other person on screen was Carney, and he gestured, and it just seemed like it was a perfect, like, the last 10 years were about the liberals, the next 10 years are going to be about you, in reference to Mark Carney. And I feel like Pierre Poilievre has no one to blame but himself for that being the case. It's very much just like a vague platitude, enough to sound very empowering, but hollow enough to be completely meaningless. It was just a flub. Not to mention when he was pressed on his security clearance, it sounded like he said, if I got my security clearance, then I would be gay. But among all of that, he also rolled out his classic hits: deregulation, pipelines, the war on the woke mob. He promised the 3 strikes law, life sentences for multiple murderers, the use of the notwithstanding clause to push it through, which is very much like openly saying he wants to weaponize the Constitution against the Charter, but has a smirk on his face when he says it. And the funny thing too is when he tried to be empathetic, it felt like that he's being like coaxed into facial expressions. Like he's reading like cues on his facial expressions from fucking cue cards. Like, there was a moment where he tried to seem relatable, and he's just one of the most unlikable people you could ever imagine. And just like, he's so disingenuous because of like the political persona that he puts forward. And then when he tries to act empathetic, it looks so, even for people, like even for conservatives, it just seems so put on. And then the only time that he seems even remotely relatable to moderates is when he takes off like the veneer of the attack dog and tries to relate to the rest of the leaders on the stage. And it just really shows him to be easily one of the most unlikable political characters in Canadian history. And I firmly believe that. Like, he tries to present those like human moments when he essentially is just breaking character to banter with Pakin or banter with Carney, or just to like gesture in a friendly way. And it seemed like just so fake, mostly just trying to be folksy, but in like a mean way. And then there was Yves-François Blanchet playing the hit, Quebec identity, Quebec autonomy, Quebec grievance, used the word Quebec so many times, as he should, as God intended, talking about on trade. Quebec needs its own leverage. He's so funny because like the way in which he presents anything that could be seen as progressive, it needs to be through the veneer of Quebec nationalism. So for every like good thing he says 3 or 4 bad things. Like Quebec needs to be have its own leverage in trade, but then also we need to have our own autonomy as far as how we're going to deal with immigrants, or our selection of immigrants and what type of people we want, which is just inherently Eurocentric, just like overtly ethno-nationalist. Quebec says no to pipelines, but then he's also like staunchly against nuclear power. He's just absurd. But I'll say it, another thing that he said, he was the only leader to directly address the genocide in Gaza, and then immediately pivoted to Islamophobia in Quebec in the same breath. Like the gymnastics are like impressive. It's such a diplomatic tightrope walk that he somehow manages to say everything and nothing all at the same time. And it's like he's operating on this nationalist autopilot. Every issue gets rerouted through the same lens of like Quebec as a nation, Ottawa as an obstacle, which like I feel it does have good elements to it, and it can bring about like a higher intelligentsia in like a dialectic of materialism type way. But the way that he uses it to create radical centrism, where he picks things from a left standpoint to use, and then he picks things from a right-wing standpoint to use, and the way that he unites them is under the guise of Quebec nationalism. And it's savvy, but it's very slimy as well. And just to talk about the host, especially, more people definitely watched, at least more people my audience watched the English language debate. And like, I think Steve Paikin is just an absolute ghoul. With that said, obviously moderating a debate of these stakes is obviously hard, especially when you got 4 men who are trying to win sound bites for different platforms and talking points. But this was just horrible. Like, he didn't reinforce the time limits consistently in any way. He let Poilievre interrupt Singh repeatedly. He failed to really challenge any type of vague talking points or circle back on contradictions. He said beforehand that he wanted to be like a hockey referee, invisible but in control. But instead, he was mostly just invisible, unless he was just being used as like a folksy prop to Carney or Poilievre, or with Blanchet being like, you're not respecting me. And there was one particularly telling moment where Singh was trying to finish a point on housing while Poilievre jumped in with a zinger. And Paikin didn't step in or do anything, and it forced Singh visibly shrugged it off and backed down. And again, that's not moderation. That's basically just abdication. And that's the broader point here. These debates are not structured for fairness. They're structured for incumbency, for performance, for theatrics. And the moderators, whether they meant to or not, they became a part of that structure. And it's very funny because if you look at the way that it worked as far as the time, it's a great representation of like the seat count almost, where like Carney has a large split with the Conservatives, Blanchet with a little bit less, and then the NDP with the least. And then, the Greens not even on the screen. Green Party of Canada, I'm going to do like a full episode on at some point before the end of the election. So I'm not going to talk about it here, but just worth mentioning, the Greens just got kicked off the debate on the morning of the French media debate on Wednesday. The morning of, removed because they didn't meet the guidelines, the threshold to be on the debate, which is fair. But I mean, doing it on the morning of, and then also moving the time because of the hockey game, and then the Rebel News stuff, which we'll get into. But in the end, like, again, it's just a microcosm of the entire structure. Carney got more time. Singh got drowned out, and nobody got called out for talking nonsense and talking in bad faith, spreading disinformation. It's just a bad night, a bad 2 nights overall. And that's a design feature. That's a feature of the system. It's not a flaw. It's a feature. And the people who are meant to challenge power either gently nudged it along, or were removed from the stage, or didn't have a voice, especially with Paikin, because like by framing everything in the way that he frames it, bringing that like Tory-centric TVO fucking attitude to this type of debate, it really just silences any type of justified, principled left point. And he did a great job of that. It's just a classic. I'm pretty sure Paikin's brother is a PC, and I'm pretty sure, his son is involved politically. He's very much a political operative, like posing as a media guy, very much like a classic Tory. And obviously, the Patrice Waugh on Wednesday, I would say a partisan, but more a Legault type partisan. So the bias didn't really come out as much. Obviously with Singh, it came out quite a bit. I also thought it was funny how Pakin kind of called out Poilievre. It was one of the only times where he pressed anybody on anything was about Ukraine. And again, it's just so funny. It just shows the lack of character. They're just imposing their ideology or their views into the debate rather than like trying to uphold the integrity of the debate as a whole.